Hello and welcome to our second video for Unit 6. Tonight we're going to talk about the midpoint. Before we get started with the lesson, we are going to add our first words into our glossary for the unit. So make sure that you fill these into your packet. The two words that we're going to talk about today are midpoint and congruent. A midpoint is the point that bisects a line segment into two congruent segments. And to be able to make sense of that, we have to talk about what congruent means. What congruent means are two shapes that are the same size and shape. So our midpoint is going to cut a line segment into two pieces that are exactly the same. So go ahead and pause the video and make sure you get those vocabulary words down. Alright, so we are going to be looking at page 4 tonight. We are going to be looking at the midpoint. So, as you could kind of tell from our definition, the midpoint is the line that lies halfway between 2 points. And the midpoint formula is kind of unique. It's a little bit different than most of the formulas we've been looking at. Our formula for the midpoint is actually an ordered pair. So we're going to start out with some parentheses. And it's going to be x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and that's going to be the x-coordinate. Then we're going to put our comma, and we're going to have y1 plus y2 divided by 2 to be our y value. So when we plug things into these midpoint formulas, we're actually going to get an ordered pair. So this ordered pair will be the point that is halfway in between each of the endpoints. So let's jump right in and look at example number 1. We're asked to find the midpoint between the points 1, 2 and negative 5, 6. So my two endpoints are 1, 2 and negative 5, 6. What we want to find is the midpoint. And to do that, we're going to look at our formula that we just wrote down. So, as you recall, with our ordered pairs, our x values are what come first. So I'm just going to go ahead and label these so that we can go ahead and tell what they're going to be when you plug them into your formula. So I'm just going to label on my first endpoints that those are x1 and y1, and on my endpoint for the second one, I'm going to have x2 and y2. So now we plug this into the formula, and I'm pulling these points straight from these two endpoints that were given. So my first x value was 1, so I'm going to put 1 there, plus my second x value, which was negative 5. Now make sure you don't leave any signs behind. That's an area where we can make some mistakes. And that's all going to be divided by 2. For the y value, it's going to be our first y value, 2, plus our second y value, 6. And we're also going to divide that by 2. This kind of has some similarity to when we were finding the median in our statistics unit. We're trying to find the point that's halfway in between 2 points. So if we simplify this, a 1 plus a negative 5 is going to give us a negative 4, and we still have that over 2. And a 2 plus 6 is going to give us 8 over 2. So we're almost there. The last thing we're going to have to do is simplify this. So negative 4 divided by 2 is going to give us a negative 2. And 8 divided by 2 is going to give us a positive 4. And we have just found our midpoint. That negative 2, 4 is going to be the point that is exactly in between these two endpoints. It's going to cut it into two congruent sections. Alright, next let's take a look at what happens when this is on the coordinate plane. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at our graph. And you can see we have a line segment here. What we are going to need to pull from this graph is our ordered pair. So I need to get my two endpoints. We'll say endpoint 1 and endpoint 2. My first endpoint, if I look at the graph, we went over 1 and up 2. So our endpoint would be 1, 2. Our endpoint for our second part, we go over 6 to the right and then up 6. So our endpoint will be 6, 6. And we need to find our midpoint. So we plug into our formula. The first thing we want to do is add our x's together. So we're going to have 1 plus 6, and we're going to divide by 2. We also want to add our y values together and divide by 2. So we're going to simplify. We're going to get 1 plus 6 is 7 over 2. And we have 2 plus 6, which is 8 over 2. Now notice these aren't going to simplify to be integers. Our second pair will, but our first number will not. So I'm just going to go ahead and put this in a decimal form. 7 divided by 2 is going to be 3.5. And 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now if we go back to our graph that we started with, if I plot this point, 3.54, and I'm just going to fill it back in up here at our midpoint so we know what that point represents. I would go over 3.5, and we don't have it by decimal, so that would be about halfway in between 3 and 4 on our x value. And then when we go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll notice that our point will fall on our line. If you get an endpoint, or if you get a midpoint that does not fall on your line, we know we made a mistake somewhere. We need to go back and check. So what that point will do is it's going to cut this line segment that we have into 2 congruent segments. Both this part and this part will be exactly the same length. So I just want to go over one more example with you guys tonight, and that is the situation where we are given one endpoint and one midpoint, and we're asked to find the other endpoint. So if I am writing this like I have been doing, I know my first endpoint is going to be negative 10, 2. I don't know what my second endpoint is going to be. So since I don't know what that's going to be, I'm just going to leave my variables in there until we can figure out what we need to do. So since this was our first ordered pair, I'm just going to label this as x2 and y2. And what we are looking for is the midpoint with this formula, but we're given the midpoint. We're told that the midpoint is 6, 1. So now we have one endpoint and the midpoint, and we need to find that endpoint that's in the middle. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug in the information we have into our formula. So we need to find x2 and y2. I'm going to focus first on finding x2. So if we remember our formula, it was x1 plus x2 divided by 2, and y1 plus y2 divided by 2. If I plug in x1, that's going to be negative 10. I don't know what x2 is, so I'm just going to put plus x2. I'm going to just kind of leave that as a placeholder for us. And I know I have to divide by 2. Now since it gives me the midpoint, I know that whatever I plug in for x2, this formula will have to give us 6. So now what this turns into is an equation that we're going to have to solve. So what we are trying to do is to get x2 all by itself so that we can figure out what it is. So we need to use inverse operations to do this. The first thing we're going to need to do is get rid of that divided by 2. If you recall from our solving unit, to undo division, we multiply. So whatever we do to one side, we have to do to both sides. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. On the left, this is going to cancel out, and we'll just be left with negative 10 plus x2 is equal to, and 6 times 2, which gives us 12. So now we have a very simple equation to solve. We need to get that negative 10 over to the other side. Since it's negative, what we're going to do is we're going to add 10 to both sides. It will cancel out on the left, and we'll get x2 is equal to 22. So we have just figured out that our x2 is equal to 22. What we need to do now is figure out what our y2 is. So we go back to our first endpoint. Our first endpoint, our y value was 2. Now, we still don't know what y2 is, so just like I put x2 in, I'm going to use y2 as a placeholder. So I have 2 plus y2 divided by 2. And this time, if I look at my midpoint, I know that my y value is going to turn out to be 1. So we're going to go through a very similar process in solving this. To get rid of that 2 on the bottom, we have to multiply both sides by 2. It will cancel out, and we'll have 2 plus y2 is equal to 1 times 2, which is 2. Now, the last thing we have to do on this, we have to subtract 2 from both sides. So y2 is going to actually be 0. So we have x2 is 22, and y2 is 0. So now we can come to the conclusion that our ordered pair for our missing endpoint is 22, 0. And we are done with the problem. Alright, I hope you have all this into your notes for our check tomorrow, and we will practice this more in class tomorrow. Have a good night.